Breaking news out of Sterling Heights, where police say a husband shot his wife in her work parking lot. That shooting happened at the Pomeroy Living Center on 15 Mile near DeQuinder. Gina Vici has an update on the victim's condition and the investigation.
Imagine waking up one morning, looking into the eyes of the children you've raised, the ones who call you dad, and suddenly realizing that nothing you've believed about your life might be true. Now, stop for a second. Picture birthdays you've celebrated, school runs you've done, the scraped knees you've patched up. Picture the quiet moments, teaching them to ride a bike, staying up late to help with homework, or simply watching them fall asleep on your chest. Those memories are sacred, aren't they? They're the glue that binds a family together. But what if I told you that in one single moment, in a handful of words on a sheet of paper, every single memory could collapse? That the people you thought you were living for might not even belong to you? That is exactly what happened in this story. A husband, a man who believed he was living the dream, who trusted his partner and adored his kids, made a discovery so devastating it turned his life upside down. It began innocently enough, a whisper of doubt, a question he never wanted to ask. And then came the decision, a DNA test, a simple test that promised certainty. He mailed it off, probably never truly believing it would change anything. Maybe he even laughed about it at first, just to be sure. But the universe has a way of dealing brutal cards to those who least expect it. Days later, the results came in. 3 results. 3 children. And every single one, read the same, not the father. Let that sink in. All 3. Not 1. Not 2. All 3 children, the family he believed was his blood, weren't his at all. Now, here's where the story twists. Most men might crumble under that kind of revelation. Rage, despair, heartbreak, those would be natural. But this man? He didn't just sit in his pain. He became something else. Something darker. Something driven. He became a hunter. A hunter of truth, of answers, of the secrets his home had been hiding right under his nose. And the deeper he dug, the more twisted the truth became. Lies, betrayal, a story so tangled it forces us to ask ourselves, how well do we really know the people we love? But before we dive into the shocking details, I want you to think about this. What would you do? If the life you've built, the very identity you hold as a parent, as a spouse, was ripped away in a single breath, would you forgive? Would you fight? Would you walk away? Or would you hunt until the truth could no longer hide? This is not just a story about DNA. It's not even just about betrayal. It's about trust, survival, and the unimaginable strength, or destruction, that a single revelation can unleash inside the human heart. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and family. The story begins in the quiet hum of everyday life. To the outside world, he looked like any other man with a family, hardworking, steady, dependable. The kind of man who believed in loyalty, who measured his worth not by the things he owned, but by the people who waited for him at home. His life revolved around them, his wife, his 3 children, the ones who ran to the door when they heard his key in the lock, who shouted, "Daddy's home," like it was the happiest announcement in the world. He loved that sound. It was the rhythm of his evenings. The promise that no matter how exhausting the day had been, he belonged somewhere. He had people to care for, little hearts who looked up at him like he was a hero. From the beginning, fatherhood had been his identity. He was there for the milestones, the first steps, the wobbly words, the tooth fairy nights. He was there when his children needed comfort, when they had questions only a father could answer. Those bonds felt unshakable, woven so tightly into his being that he couldn't imagine himself without them. And his wife, she was his partner, or so he thought. He believed in her, trusted her in ways that left no room for suspicion. Together, they built what looked like a future, family trips, school events, long nights planning what life would look like when the kids were older. To him, their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was strong enough to weather storms. That's why, in the beginning, the thought never even crossed his mind. But life has a strange way of whispering doubts into places we least expect. It started subtly. A joke here, a careless comment there. Friends teasing, strangers making offhand remarks about how little resemblance the children bore to him. At first, he brushed it off. "Not every kid looks exactly like their dad," he would laugh. "Genetics, after all, is tricky." Still, sometimes, in the quiet, when he studied their faces, the curve of a jaw, the arch of a brow, the whispers grew louder. He would search for himself in their eyes and come up empty. But he buried it. What good could come from digging into something so destructive? Until one day, the seed of doubt became impossible to ignore. It was an ordinary evening. The kids were doing homework at the table, his wife bustling in the kitchen, the television murmuring in the background. And then a small exchange, nothing monumental, but enough to unsettle him. One of the children asked a question about their features, about why they looked the way they did. His wife's answer was quick, too quick, wrapped in laughter that didn't quite reach her eyes. That was the moment the seed sprouted. He didn't confront her, not then. Instead, he kept it to himself, letting the suspicion quietly gnaw at the edges of his mind. Nights grew longer. He'd lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying years of memories, searching for clues he might have missed. His trust was a shield, but it was cracking, and through the cracks poured questions he couldn't silence. It was around this time that he stumbled upon the idea of a DNA test. It seemed harmless enough at first, a curiosity, almost. But the thought stuck. The more he turned it over in his mind, the more it felt like an answer waiting for him, daring him. He wrestled with it. To take the test meant opening a door that could never be closed. What if the results brought pain? What if the doubts proved true? Was ignorance better than knowledge? But the human heart is not built to live with questions that eat it from the inside. So he did it. Quietly. Secretly. He ordered the kit, telling no one. Days later, when the package arrived, he felt a rush of unease, as though he were committing a betrayal of his own. But it was too late to turn back. He swabbed the inside of his cheek, and then the children's, disguising it as a game, a curious little experiment. He sealed the samples, mailed them off, and tried to forget. But forgetting was impossible. The weight was unbearable. Days felt like weeks, weeks like months. Every moment became heavy with anticipation. He found himself scrutinizing his family more than ever. A smile would suddenly seem foreign, a laugh unfamiliar, a mannerism borrowed from nowhere he could trace. He watched his wife carefully, looking for cracks in her armor, wondering if she knew the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. And yet, life continued. School pickups, family dinners, lazy weekends on the couch. From the outside, everything looked the same. But inside, a chasm had opened, and he was teetering on the edge. Then the envelope arrived. It was small, unremarkable, the kind of thing that might slip unnoticed into the mailbox. But for him, it carried the weight of an entire world. His hands trembled as he held it, the paper impossibly heavy. He didn't open it right away. For hours, he walked around with it, his heart racing. What if everything he feared was true? What if his life was built on a lie? And yet, what if it wasn't? What if he was wrong, and this test would only confirm his deepest love? Finally, when the house was quiet, he sat down at the kitchen table. The clock ticked, loud and steady, as if counting down the seconds to the end of the life he thought he knew. He tore the envelope open, unfolded the paper, and read. The words were clinical, stripped of emotion. Cold percentages. Clear conclusions. But to him they screamed. They clawed at his heart with a violence he couldn't describe. One child, not the father. He blinked, the room spinning. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he read it wrong. Second child, not the father. The paper slipped in his hands, his pulse roaring in his ears. Third child, not the father. Silence. Then a sound escaped him. Half sob, half gasp, the kind of sound that belongs to someone watching their entire world disintegrate before their eyes. 3 children. 3 lives. And not one drop of him in them. The test hadn't just confirmed his fears. It had shattered his very identity. And yet, as devastating as it was, this was only the beginning. Because in that moment, as grief gripped him, something else ignited too. A fire. A need for answers. A need for truth. If the children weren't his, then whose were they? And just like that, the man who once defined himself by fatherhood became something else entirely. A hunter. The kitchen table had never felt so cold. It was just a slab of wood, a place where homework was done, where meals were shared, where laughter and spilled juice once filled the air. But that night, it became an altar of truth, and the sacrifice laid upon it was his peace of mind. He stared at the DNA results long after he could no longer see the words. His hands gripped the paper until it crumpled, until the edges cut into his palms. He read them again and again, each line mocking him, tearing open wounds he didn't know he had. The words never changed. They were merciless, final. Not the father. Not the father. Not the father. 3 verdicts, 3 death sentences to the life he thought was his. At first came the denial. His mind clawed desperately for explanations. Perhaps the lab had mixed up the samples. Perhaps the kit was faulty. Maybe he had made a mistake in how he collected them. He replayed every step in his mind, searching for cracks in the process, searching for a lifeline. But the more he thought about it, the more certain it became, this was no mistake. And then, like a dam breaking, came the rage. It wasn't quiet. It was volcanic, violent, coursing through his veins like fire. He pounded his fists on the table, the sound echoing through the empty house. He wanted to scream, to break something, to tear down the walls that had sheltered so many lies. His heart raced, his breath came shallow, his entire body trembled under the weight of betrayal. How could she?
Yeah, this is still a very active scene behind me. Take a look at this. Look at the bullet casing markings on the ground here. Sterling Heights police saying around 8 o'clock this morning they received a 911 call that a woman had been shot in the parking lot here at the Pomeroy Living Center off of 15 Mile near DeQuinder. We're told an employee was shot by her husband in the parking lot. We're told they both lived in the city of Warren and that the husband came up to his wife's employer and shot her several times. Police thankfully were able to respond to the scene within seconds. The wife was rushed to a nearby hospital where she is still alive.
He replayed the years, every smile, every whispered promise, every late-night conversation where she swore they were in it together. Were they all lies? Was she laughing behind his back while he raised children that weren't his? The thought burned so hot it nearly consumed him. When his wife walked into the room that night, she knew immediately. His face gave it away. The paper on the table told the rest. Her eyes darted from him to the envelope, her lips parting but no words escaping. Explain, he demanded. His voice was low, steady, too steady. That steadiness was more terrifying than if he had shouted. She froze. Then the excuses came, weak and stumbling. She said he misunderstood. She said Tess could be wrong. She said love was bigger than blood. But each word only fueled the inferno inside him. 3 children? He spat, his voice cracking with fury. All 3? You didn't make a mistake once. You lied to me every single day of my life. Tears streamed down her face, but her tears could not wash away the truth. The room thickened with silence, broken only by the sound of her sobs and his heavy breathing. That night, something inside him shifted. He could have left then, walked out, shut the door on her lies and the children who suddenly felt like strangers. But he didn't, because underneath the rage was something stronger, a hunger. He needed answers. He needed to know the depth of the deception. Who was the father? Or fathers? How long had this been going on? Was every memory, every moment, scripted by betrayal? He became consumed, not just by grief, but by a primal need to hunt down the truth. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and investigation. He combed through phone records, bank statements, old messages, anything that might point to the shadow hiding in their marriage. He replayed conversations in his head, moments when she came home late, excuses she'd given, glances she thought he hadn't noticed. The lies began to unravel like threads pulled from a once pristine fabric. She confessed in fragments, pieces of a puzzle she hoped he'd stop trying to solve. She admitted there had been another man, or maybe more. Sometimes her story shifted. Sometimes she contradicted herself. But he no longer trusted her words. He wanted proof. Concrete. Undeniable. That's when the transformation happened. He wasn't a husband anymore. Not even a father in the way he once believed. He became something sharper, colder, a man on a mission. He tracked patterns in her behavior, mapped timelines against the children's births, searched for photographs, receipts, even the faintest clues. Each discovery was like a knife, cutting deeper, but also sharpening his resolve. He confronted her with the evidence one evening, papers and screenshots spread across the table like weapons. "Who is he?" he asked. His voice shook not from weakness, but from the weight of carrying questions that had poisoned his soul. She hesitated, lied again, then finally whispered a name. The name hit him like a punch to the chest. It wasn't just anyone. It was someone close enough to make the betrayal unbearable. A family friend. Someone he had trusted, welcomed into his home, clinked glasses with at gatherings. The realization made him sick. The betrayal wasn't just marital, it was communal. The circle of lies was wider than he'd imagined. He wanted to confront the man immediately, to demand answers face to face. But another voice inside him urged patience. Hunters don't rush. They stalk, they wait, they strike with precision. So he waited. In the meantime, the atmosphere at home became suffocating. The children, innocent in all of this, sensed the tension. They asked questions he couldn't answer. They looked at him with eyes that once filled him with pride, but now twisted the knife in his chest. How could he look at them the same way, knowing the truth? And yet, how could he stop loving them when every memory of their lives was tied to him? This conflict tore at him. His heart ached for the children, but his pride, his identity, screamed in protest. Were they still his children if not by blood? Could love outweigh betrayal? But love alone wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed truth. The day came when he finally confronted the other man. It wasn't theatrical. No public shouting match. Just two men, face to face, in the suffocating silence of a private room. The hunter had cornered his prey. "I know," he said simply, sliding the DNA results across the table. The man shifted uncomfortably, his bravado fading. Lies stumbled from his lips, then excuses, then silence. The silence told him more than words ever could. In that moment, the husband realized something chilling. The betrayal wasn't just about infidelity. It was about power, about choice, about the theft of his very identity as a father. The confrontation didn't bring the closure he expected. Instead, it opened more wounds, exposed more questions. Who else knew? How many times had they laughed behind his back? How long had his life been nothing but a performance staged for his humiliation? The rage simmered into something colder now, calculation. He didn't just want answers anymore. He wanted control. He wanted to reclaim the pieces of his life that had been stolen. So he planned. Every conversation, every confrontation, became part of a larger strategy. He wasn't reacting anymore, he was orchestrating. He gathered evidence like ammunition, lined up timelines like coordinates, pieced together the truth like a crime scene investigator. The hunter had emerged fully. And yet, even as he pursued the truth with relentless focus, he couldn't silence the war inside him. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between rage at his wife and pity for his children. They didn't ask for this. They didn't choose it. They were victims too. That's when the question began to haunt him. Was he hunting justice, or was he hunting vengeance? The difference mattered, because justice might set him free, but vengeance could destroy him. This was the battlefield of his soul, caught between the man he once was, the father who loved without question, and the hunter he had become, sharpened by betrayal, driven by rage. And the deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. Because when you go hunting for truth, you must be ready for what you find. The hunter had gathered his weapons. Not the kind forged of steel or firepower, but of truth. Documents, timelines, testimonies, whispers stitched together into a tapestry of betrayal. Every page, every screenshot, every inconsistency he had unearthed was now laid bare. But evidence alone was not enough. The storm inside him demanded confrontation, demanded that lies be stripped down until only raw honesty remained. The time had come. It was a quiet evening, the kind that carried an unsettling calm, as though the world itself was holding its breath. He chose this moment deliberately. The children were away. The house was still. There would be no interruptions, no distractions. Only truth. He sat at the table, the same table where the DNA results had first shattered his life. His wife entered slowly, her face weary, her eyes red from nights of tears. She knew. She knew this was the reckoning. Between them lay the evidence. Papers spread like the shards of a broken mirror, each reflecting the fragments of a marriage that no longer existed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried the weight of a man who had walked through fire and emerged hardened, forged into something unrecognizable. "Tell me everything," he said. This time, there was no denying, no half-truths to shield herself. The dam broke, she confessed, halting at first, then pouring out years of secrets. Affairs cloaked in excuses. Deceptions masked as loyalty. The truth bled into the room, staining everything it touched. Her words cut deep, each confession another dagger. But he didn't flinch. He sat still, absorbing, cataloging, letting the story unfold in all its ugliness. The hunter had cornered his prey, and now he demanded nothing but honesty. When it was over, the silence was deafening. She sobbed, begging forgiveness, pleading that love was still real, that family could still be salvaged. But forgiveness, he realized, was not something she could demand. It was something only he could choose, and he wasn't ready. Not yet. Because forgiveness without truth is surrender. And he had surrendered enough already. The confrontation with her left him hollow, but there was still one more reckoning. The man. The other man. The shadow who had stolen his place, who had walked unseen in the background of his life. Their meeting was tense, raw, stripped of civility. The hunter stared into the eyes of the one who had destroyed his family, and for a moment, rage nearly consumed him. He could feel the weight of violence hovering, tempting. But he resisted. He didn't want prison bars to be the ending of this story. Instead, he delivered a verdict of his own. "You will not take any more from me. Not my dignity. Not my peace. This ends here." It wasn't about reclaiming the past, that was gone. It was about taking control of the future. For the first time since the DNA test, he felt something shift inside him. Not victory, not exactly, but clarity. The truth was out. The lies were exposed. And while the damage could never be undone, the power to choose his next steps now belonged solely to him. The aftermath was brutal. The children, innocent souls caught in a storm not of their making, needed answers. How do you tell them the man they call dad is not tied to them by blood? How do you explain betrayal without poisoning them against their own mother? He chose his words carefully. He told them the truth, but not the venom. He let them know that while biology had betrayed him, love had not. "You may not carry my blood," he whispered, "but you carry my heart. And that's what makes us family." It was not easy. Tears were shed, confusion lingered, trust wavered. But in those moments, something remarkable happened. The bond between him and the children didn't vanish. It bent, it trembled, but it did not break. Because love, when true, can exist even in the shadow of lies. His marriage, however, could not survive. Too many fractures, too much deceit. They parted ways, not with the fireworks of anger, but with the quiet resignation of two people who knew their story had reached its end. For him, the road forward was uncharted. He was no longer the same man who once believed life was simple, safe, predictable. He had been broken open, forced to rebuild himself from ashes. But in that rebuilding came strength. He realized something powerful: blood does not define family. Trust does. Love does. Choice does. And while betrayal had tried to steal everything from him, it could not steal his capacity to choose who he wanted to be. The hunter had found his truth. And in finding it, he discovered his freedom. This story isn't just about one man's betrayal. It's about the fragility of trust, the cruelty of secrets, and the resilience of the human spirit. It's about how easily the foundations of our lives can crumble, and yet how possible it is to rise again from the ruins. And it leaves us with questions that are bigger than him, bigger than this family. What defines a parent, blood, or love? What defines a marriage, loyalty, or survival? And when truth finally comes knocking, do we bury it, or do we face it, no matter how painful it may be. Now, I want to turn this over to you. If you were in his shoes, if you discovered that none of your children were biologically yours, what would you do? Could you still love them the same way? Could you forgive the betrayal, or would the hunter in you rise up, demanding answers? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts, your stories, your truth. And if this story gripped you, if it made you think, if it left you shaken the way it shook him, do me a favor. Hit that like button so this story reaches more people. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because betrayal, forgiveness, and resilience are things we all grapple with. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Join this growing community where we share stories that challenge us, move us, and remind us of the strength we carry inside. This is more than just a channel. It's a place for voices, for truth, for reflection. And I want you to be part of it. Because at the end of the day, stories like this aren't just about them. They're about all of us. When trust is shattered, when lies are exposed, when the DNA test says all three not his, the real question is, how do we rise?